In this video, we're going to cover how to download and install the Unis application for Virdi biometric enrollment. The first thing we're going to need to do is browse to ftp.avigilon.com under the ACM and then Virdi directory. We're going to be downloading the Unis Setup zip file. Once your file has been properly downloaded, you can go in and find it using the Windows file system. Mine downloaded to the downloads folder. We're going to go ahead and extract the contents of this zip file. From here, we're going to run the setup file, which will install the Unis application. There may be some additional requirements that will be needed to be downloaded for your operating system. Go ahead and click install. Click next. We want to accept the license agreement. Depending on your application, you will need to fill out some of this information. I'm going to go ahead and just use this. Once you've completed the registration, click next. This is going to install to a default folder on the machine. Okay. For your application, we are going to be installing the server with all of the common options. Once installation is complete, you can click Finish. If you now navigate to the desktop of your machine, you should see the Unis Remote Manager application. Once you've successfully installed Unis Remote Manager, we can go ahead and do the initial configuration. Upon the initial installation of Unis, you will need to create a password to log into the system. Keep in mind you will need to remember this password for access to the system in the future. Okay. To log into the application, you're going to click the Master Login button, which will use the default administrator or zeros username along with the password that you just set. Once you've logged in, this will get you into the Unis application so that you can go in and configure your terminals for use with ACM. In this tutorial, we're going to be covering how to download and update the firmware on both the AC5000 and AC2000 Virdi biometric readers. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is download the firmware from Avigilon's FTP site. The URL for that is ftp.avigilon.com. And we're going to go into the ACM directory, down to Virdi, and under terminal firmware. You'll notice in this folder that there's two separate folders, one for the AC2000 and one for the AC5000. So we'll go ahead and download the AC2000 first, which is an AC2K, and it is a .bin file. Go ahead and save this to your computer. While that's doing that, we're going to go ahead and download the AC5000 as well. And we'll save that. Okay. Just check that these are both downloaded. Okay. We'll go ahead and open up the folder just to make sure that they're there. And here they are. Okay. Then we're going to go over into the Unis software program. we're going to go into the terminal list. You can see here in my list, I have 2 AC 2000 readers and I have 1 AC 5000 readers. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the AC 2000 readers. We're going to come up here to upgrade firmware. We're going to pick the firmware file that's appropriate for your reader. So this is the file that we just downloaded. We'll click open. We're going to only select the AC 2000 readers. So this AC 5000 will uncheck this box, and then we'll click send. This process can take anywhere between 10 and 30 seconds per reader. When it's successfully updated, you will see a success in the result here. Okay, both readers have been successfully updated, so we'll go ahead and close this window. We're going to back out of the terminal window and go back into it just to make sure that they're there. And you'll see that the versions on each of our readers are correct. So now we'll go ahead and do the 5000 as well. Same process, upgrade firmware, select your AC 5000, so AC 5K. And then we want to make sure that we only select the AC 5000 reader. Click send. And just like before, it'll go through the upgrade process. When it gets to 576, the reader will be completely updated. Okay, so we get a success. My reader is upgrading its firmware. You'll notice that with the AC 5000 reader, because it has an LED or LCD display, it will show you that the firmware is upgrading, and it gives you a status of that. This process does take about 30 seconds, and it will reset the reader during the process. So it's going offline, coming back online. We're waiting for OSDP to reconnect to the board. And once it gets us back to the base screen, the reader will be online and ready for use. And there we go. And that's how you upgrade the firmware on the AC 5000. In this tutorial, we're going to cover the configuration of an AC 5000 biometric reader from Virdi for use with ACM. When you've unpackaged and installed your reader and applied power, you should get a screen that looks similar to this. To get into the configuration menu, you need to place several of your fingers on the screen at the bottom and the keypad will be lit. And then go ahead and hold down the ENT button to get into the configuration menu. So from here, once you've gotten into the configuration menu, we're going to need to set the network and terminal and server IPs for the unit to communicate to. So the first thing we're going to do is press 2 for network. We're going to go ahead and press 1 to set the IP address of this unit. If you're using a static IP address for your environment, you would go ahead and hit enter and then fill out this information. For my environment, I'm actually going to use DHCP, so I can grab an IP address from a DHCP server. Press and hold the enter button to release and go to the previous menu. We're now going to enter in the server IP. Keep in mind, this is the IP address of the Unis server that will be communicating to your readers. So my server is this address here. I'm going to go ahead and press and hold the ENT button, the enter button, to get back to the menu. We're going to press F4 to go back one step. And we're now going to enter in the terminal ID. Keep in mind, for any of your Virdi installations, each reader has to have a specific terminal ID for them to communicate properly. So for my environment, I'm going to leave this one as 1. If I had multiple readers, we would increment up from terminal ID 1. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the ENT. We're going to press F4 to go back to the configuration menu. From here, we're going to press 5 to go into terminal, and we're going to press 6 to go into external device, because we need to change the lock controller from its current of none to OSDP. So we're going to press 6 to change it to OSDP. Once again, keep in mind, Virdi readers use OSDP to communicate with Mercury panels, not Wiegand. So you must change this to OSDP. Press and hold the ENT button, and then we're going to press F4 to go back, F4 one more time to exit out, and then press 1, then enter to save. At this point, your unit should go offline and then reset. Once the unit has reset and has made a connection to the Mercury controller via OSDP, you'll be returned to the default screen, and it should look something like this. Once you've properly addressed your reader in the field, we'll go into the Unis software to add the terminal to Unis. So this is the Unis application. We're going to go ahead and click Terminal, and then we're going to go up here to Add Terminal. And we're going to put in the ID number of the terminal that we configured previously in the video. So remember, we used terminal ID 1. We do need to give this a name, so I'm going to use AC5000 reader 1. The rest of this information can stay default, and then we'll click Add, and you should get a registration complete. You can close out of this window. When the reader communicates successfully to the Unis server, this IP address and MAC address fields will be filled out, and it will show you the correct information for that reader. So this is how you're going to connect to your AC2000 using the Unis B Plus app. I'm doing this on an iPad. This does work on iPhone as well as Android. So the first thing you're going to do is click Search Peripherals. It should take you into a terminal list. This is using the Bluetooth on the device to connect to your reader. If the terminal is accessible, you should be able to click the View button. When you get to this screen where it's asking you to fill out a username and password, just go ahead and click OK. And what you'll see is the reader will go into a pairing or connecting mode, and you'll hear a little tone. Next, you're going to click Setting. And then you're going to click Edit. Now, each one of your terminals is going to require an individual ID, so you'll have to assign an ID number to each one. You will change the lock controller from the default of relay to OSDP. Click Select. The next thing that you need to change is the IP address or the IP address format that it's going to be using. In my environment, I'm using DHCP to grab an IP address from the network, but if you're not doing that, you can set this manually to a static IP address. The next thing that you need to do is put in the server IP. This IP address is the IP of the Unis server, or the server that's running the Unis software. Once you put that in there, you go ahead and click Save. It should change the setting on the terminal. Click OK. Once the terminal's back to normal, the blue light will go away, and it should show either no light or red light. Once you've successfully configured your reader at the reader location, we're going to go ahead and go into the Unis application to add it to the system so that it can communicate with the Unis server. So I'm logged into Unis now. I'm going to go ahead and click the Terminal tab, and we're going to go up here to Add Terminal. And remember that the terminal ID that we used in configuration earlier in the video was ID number 4. So we're going to modify this to ID number 4. And you do need to give it a unique name to any of the other readers on your system. So this is going to be an AC2000. Mine just happens to be a MyFair version, so I want to put that there. The rest of this information can be left default, and you're going to go ahead and click Add. You should get a registration complete. Go ahead and close this window. When the ID or when the terminal connects successfully to Unis, you will see that the IP address and MAC address are filled out in these two columns. This means that the unit is successfully talking to the Unis server. In this tutorial, we're going to be covering how to add a Virdi biometric reader to your ACM system. A prerequisite before we're going to add the door. We're going to go in and we're going to create two new card formats that the Virdi readers will use to read the fingerprints. So we're going to go into physical access and then card formats. The first card format that we're going to add is a 32-bit Virdi. So we're going to label it 32-bit underscore Virdi. Our card format is going to be weekend. We're not going to assign a offset or facility code. We are going to assign the number of bits to be 32 and the card number length to be 32. And then it's important that you check the reverse card bytes checkbox. We're also going to be adding a 56-bit Avigilon biometric option as well. So we're going to do 56-bit bio. Same thing, card type is going to be weekend. The facility code on this is going to be the standard 858 for Avigilon I-class cards. We're going to set the number of bits to 56, card number length once again to 56, and we are going to use the reverse card bytes checkbox. Now that we've got the card format successfully created, we can go back over to the physical access under doors, and we can add our Virdi biometric door to the system. So we're going to click Add Door. If you are using version 5.12 or later, you will get this template notification if you have templates created in your system. We're going to actually not use a template to build this. So we'll cancel out of that, and we're going to go ahead and label the door. So the reader I'm going to be adding is one of our AC2000 readers, so I'm labeling that accordingly. We're going to pick our vendor, which will be Mercury Security for my application, and then the panel that I've already assigned. Keep in mind, I have already created my panels, and I've gone in and I've also pre-labeled my inputs, outputs, and readers to make it a little bit easier for installation. So our access type, we're going to select single. The door mode, we're going to select card only. So the normal door mode for this reader will be card only. This will allow you to read either fingerprint or card or both at the door. We're not going to check any of the door processing attributes for this exercise, but you can use some of these options depending on your application. Go ahead and click Save. Same thing here. We're not going to make any changes, but this will depend on your application. Well, the one thing you do want to make sure is that your card formats, the two new card formats that you created, the 32-bit Virdi and the 56-bit Bio, are both enabled for your reader. So we'll go ahead and click Save again here. And then this will take us to the hardware page where we're going to go ahead and select our reader. We're going to select our door position sensor, our Rex, and our strike. We'll go ahead and save that. We're going to go back into hardware because at this point, the reader will not be online because we need to change it from standard Wiegand D1, D0 to OSDP. So in the reader type, we're going to change this to custom. Under LED drive, we're going to drop down to the OSDP, and then we're going to click Save. And now the reader will be using OSDP versus standard Wiegand. If we go back over to our doors listing page, we can see down here for our Virdi AC2000 that we're green and online. So a quick troubleshooting step. Although the process is the same for adding a door, whether it's an AC2000 or an AC5000, I wanted to show that the AC5000 does give you the LCD readout. So if you're if you run into a situation where you are getting an OSDP disconnect at the reader, as you can see here, if I change the LED drive to none, the reader will give us an OSDP disconnect. So if you're seeing that out at a door, that means that you're actually getting that you're not using OSDP to communicate via from ACM to the reader itself. So you see I get the OSDP disconnect here. If I go back into the reader and change it back to OSDP and save it, within 10 seconds or so, the reader will come back online and the OSDP disconnect message will go away.